I still remember the way my father laughed that night. Sharp, short, and cruel, like a door slamming in my face. We were sitting in the kitchen of our small Alabama house, the ceiling fan humming above us, when I told him I'd been saving up to travel after graduation. He didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Travel," he said, voice thick with disbelief. "You? You can't even make it past Birmingham without getting lost, June."
June.
That's me, June Everett, 22. The girl who'd spent her whole life mapping places she'd never seen. My bedroom walls were covered with postcards and printouts of cities I'd only dreamed of: Prague, Kyoto, Lisbon. I used to mark them with sticky notes like someone preparing for an exam. Only my exam was freedom. But Dad, Ray Everett, believed in fences, not horizons. He'd worked at the same auto shop since he was 19 and thought ambition was arrogance in disguise. People who chase adventure, he'd say, end up broke or lost. That night, I told him I'd been working extra shifts at the diner, saving every tip, and even got accepted into a language program in Spain. For a moment, he stared at me like he didn't understand English. Then the corner of his mouth twitched into a smirk. "Spain," he repeated. "You can't even handle a flat tire, June. You'll be calling me to come pick you up from the airport in a week." Mom didn't say anything. She just stirred her coffee, eyes down. Silence was her specialty, the kind that agreed without words. My throat tightened. "I'm not asking for your help," I said quietly. "I'm just telling you what I'm doing." Dad folded the newspaper, slow and deliberate. "No, you're not. You're talking nonsense. You'll stay here, save your money, and stop chasing fairy tales." He walked out of the kitchen, leaving the smell of motor oil and control behind him. I sat there a long time, staring at the map on my wall through the doorway. That was the first time I realized travel wasn't just about leaving home, it was about escaping gravity. And I promised myself, no matter how long it took, I'd buy a ticket out. One day, I'd send him a postcard from the sky. I left home 2 months later, without a goodbye. The morning I boarded the Greyhound to Atlanta, my father was in the garage, tightening bolts beneath a car hood. He didn't look up when he heard my suitcase wheels scrape the driveway. I think that was his way of saying goodbye, pretending I wasn't leaving at all. From Atlanta, I took a cheap flight to Madrid. I had one duffel bag, a folded map, and $642 in my bank account. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first few months were brutal. I cleaned hostel bathrooms during the day, translated English menus at night, and slept in rooms that smelled like strangers and soap. But each morning, when sunlight spilled through cracked shutters, I felt freer than I ever had in Alabama. I stopped counting miles and started counting moments, tiny victories that made the struggle worth it. Learning to order coffee in Spanish without fumbling. Getting my first travel photography feature published on a local website. Finding friends who didn't measure worth in obedience, but in courage. Every new city added a layer to me. Lisbon taught me to be patient with sunsets. Prague taught me loneliness can be sacred. Istanbul taught me to dance even when no one's watching. 3 years passed quietly. I didn't call home, and no one called me. Not on birthdays, not on holidays. The silence between me and my father grew wider than the ocean itself. By the 5th year, I was living in Florence, writing a travel blog called Halfway to Everywhere. It started as a digital diary for myself, snippets of laughter, tears, and narrow alleyways, but people began to read it. Then hundreds. Then thousands. When a publisher emailed asking if I'd ever thought of turning my journey into a book, I stared at the screen for a long time, heart trembling. Because the truth was, I'd never written for success. I'd written to prove I existed beyond his words. That night, standing on a balcony overlooking the Arno River, I whispered to the wind,
"See me now, Dad.
I made it farther than you ever believed I could." The city lights shimmered like applause. And for the first time, I didn't feel small anymore. It was almost 7 years after I'd left home when my past decided to find me again. One morning, while answering emails in a small cafe in Copenhagen, I noticed a new message in my inbox. The sender's name froze me. Ray Everett. The subject line read, "Proud of you, kid." I didn't open it. Not right away. My heart beat against my ribs like it was trying to escape the years between us. For hours, I stared at the unopened message while the espresso cooled beside me. Finally, curiosity won. Saw your article in that magazine. Can't believe you really did all that. Guess I taught you discipline after all. Anyway, I hope you're doing good. You should come visit sometime. Your old room's still here. Discipline. That was the word he chose. Not faith, not sorry, not love.
Discipline.
He'd turned my freedom into his credit. 2 days later, another message arrived. Your mom keeps saying we should talk. I know I said some things back then, but you can't hold that against me forever. Parents just worry, you know? Besides, you wouldn't be this successful without my tough love. Tough love. The phrase made me laugh out loud in that quiet cafe, earning a few startled glances. He wasn't apologizing. He was rewriting history, turning my rebellion into his lesson plan. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my blog editor and began writing a new post titled, "Silence Speaks Louder Than Approval." I wrote about how people who once doubted you will try to take credit when you rise. How silence, sometimes, is the loudest way to reclaim your story. The post went viral overnight. And even though my father's emails kept coming, each one more sentimental, more self-serving, I never replied. Because some messages don't deserve an answer. Some people only reach out when they realize the person they underestimated is finally out of reach. It happened on a rainy Thursday in Seattle. I was signing copies of my first book, Halfway to Everywhere, at a local bookstore. The line curved around the shelves, readers smiling, cameras flashing, voices soft with admiration. And then I saw him. He stood at the end of the line, older but unmistakably the same, Ray Everett, denim jacket, weathered hands, the faint smell of engine oil clinging to him even now. My stomach twisted, but I didn't flinch. When he reached my table, he gave me a lopsided grin. "Didn't think I'd ever see the day," he said. "My kid, an author. You sure proved me wrong, huh?" His words were meant to sound humble, but his tone carried that same old ownership, as if my success was his story to complete. I capped my pen, meeting his gaze. "I didn't do it to prove you wrong," I said evenly. "I did it because I finally stopped needing your permission." He blinked, startled by my calm. "You always were dramatic, June. You know, I wasn't that bad of a father. I just wanted you to be realistic." "Realistic?" I echoed, my voice steady. "That's what you called fear." He shifted his weight, glancing at the people behind him. The audience had gone quiet, curious but respectful, sensing the tension. "Look," he said, lowering his voice, "I came to make peace. Maybe grab dinner after this? It's been years." I smiled, not bitterly but sadly. "You came here because people know my name now. If this book hadn't made the papers, you wouldn't be standing here." He didn't answer. His eyes darted away, just like they used to when the truth cut too close. I slid a signed copy of my book across the table toward him. Inside, I'd written one sentence. "To the man who told me I'd never travel, thank you for giving me the reason to go farther." He read it, exhaled slowly, and nodded. "Guess you showed me, huh?" I looked up, voice soft but firm. "You were right about one thing, Dad. I did go far. Just not with you." He left without another word, shoulders hunched against the rain. And as the bookstore lights reflected in the window, I realized something simple but profound. Closure doesn't come from apologies. It comes from finally being beyond their reach. After that day in Seattle, I never saw my father again, not in person. But small-town news has long arms, and whispers have a way of traveling farther than postcards. 6 months later, I heard from an old neighbor back in Alabama. "Your dad's shop closed down," she said. "Word is, he trusted the wrong partner. Lost everything." I sat quietly on the phone, listening to the wind move through the trees outside my apartment window. "Is he okay?" I finally asked. A pause. Pride doesn't leave much room for okay. That night, I looked up his old business online. The sign above Everett Auto Repair was gone. The lot was empty, just a gravel patch and a faded imprint of the letters that once spelled his name. It felt strange. I didn't feel joy or pity, just inevitability. For years, he'd built his life around control. But control is a fragile thing. Once it cracks, there's nothing to stand on. Meanwhile, my world kept expanding. My second book, The Map Within, became a bestseller. I was invited to speak at conferences, asked to mentor young women who dreamed of seeing the world. Every face I met reminded me why I'd left and why I never went back. Sometimes, I'd receive anonymous comments on my blog. Bitter, defensive words that sounded too familiar. Some people forget who raised them. Fame doesn't mean you're better. I never replied. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was someone else. Either way, I didn't owe anyone my peace. I learned something in those years. People who tear you down are often terrified of your reflection because it shows them everything they could have been if they weren't afraid. And though I never wished him harm, I couldn't deny the quiet symmetry of it all. He'd spent his life telling me I'd never get far. And now he was the one standing still while I was halfway across the world. The letter arrived on a gray morning in early spring. It came in a plain white envelope, the handwriting uneven and trembling, like the ink itself was afraid of being read. I recognized it instantly. Ray Everett. For a long time, I didn't open it. I left it on the kitchen counter beside a vase of tulips, letting it sit there for days. A ghost I wasn't sure I was ready to face. When I finally did, the paper smelled faintly of oil and dust. June, I saw your interview on TV. You looked happy. Older, wiser. I guess I never thought you'd become all that without me. I said things I shouldn't have, things I thought would protect you. Truth is, I was scared. The world's a hard place. I didn't want to see you fail and hate me for letting you try. But maybe I did worse by keeping you small. Anyway, I'm proud of you. I always was. I just didn't know how to say it. Dad. The words blurred for a moment as my eyes filled. It wasn't a real apology. Not completely, but there was truth buried in the cracks.
Fear.
Regret. Maybe love, too, in its most broken form. I folded the letter gently, sliding it between the pages of my passport. The two symbols, one of freedom, one of the cage I'd escaped, belonged side by side. I didn't write back. Not because I hated him, but because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about reopening old doors. It's about walking past them and never needing to knock again. Sometimes peace doesn't come from what's said. It comes from what you choose not to answer. And for me, silence had always been the truest kind of closure. After the letter, I stopped waiting for things that never arrived. Apologies, recognition, closure. Instead, I started noticing what had arrived. People. Real, kind, open-hearted people. In Florence, I met Tessa Morgan, a travel photographer from Oregon who believed laughter was a survival skill. She became my roommate, then my best friend. Together, we started a small workshop for women who wanted to travel solo but didn't know where to begin. We called it the Brave Compass. Every month, we hosted small gatherings in our sunlit studio, mismatched chairs, coffee mugs from different countries, a wall filled with pinned Polaroids of smiling faces. Women of all ages came, each with a dream they were afraid to say out loud. We listened. We shared stories. We handed out maps like keys. And somewhere between the laughter and the planning, I realized I had built the thing I'd been searching for my whole life. Not a destination, but a community. These women became my family, the kind that didn't need blood or history to belong. They celebrated each other's courage, patched each other's doubts, and made the world feel smaller in the best way. When our group was featured in a travel magazine, the editor asked me, "What inspired you to start this?" I smiled and said, "A promise I made to a younger version of myself, that I'd never let someone else's fear become my ceiling." Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd look around the studio and see women hugging, laughing, planning trips together. And I'd think about the little girl in Alabama, tracing her finger across a paper map, wishing she could escape. She had no idea that one day she'd not only leave, she'd lead. And in that soft hum of shared joy, I finally understood something my father never did. Family isn't always who raises you. Sometimes it's who lifts you. The years rolled on like quiet waves. By the time my third book came out, Miles from Yesterday, I wasn't just known as a traveler. I'd become a voice for women who'd been told they couldn't. My workshops had grown into a foundation, and my name, June Everett, appeared in magazines I used to stack on my nightstand back home. One morning, an email arrived from my mother. Her words were short, hesitant. "Your father isn't doing well. The doctors say he doesn't leave the house anymore. He still talks about you sometimes. Mostly about the past." I read it twice, then set my phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. Just peaceful. A week later, I mailed a package to my father's address. Inside was a single envelope containing one thing, a plane ticket. Destination: anywhere. Date: open-ended. Class: one way. I didn't include a note. He'd understand. Maybe he'd see it as mockery. Maybe as mercy. Either way, it was the full circle moment life had been building toward, a quiet answer to every word he'd once thrown at me. He never used the ticket, but that didn't matter, because the gift wasn't meant for him. It was for me, the girl who once stood in that kitchen, too afraid to believe her dreams could reach past the county line. Now I had flown farther than his imagination ever stretched. Sometimes during my talks, people ask me what revenge feels like, and I always smile and tell them the truth. Revenge isn't shouting. It's living well. It's buying your peace 1 mile at a time. I still keep a copy of that ticket framed on my wall, not as a symbol of bitterness, but of distance. Not the kind you measure in miles, but in freedom. Because true legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you build and protect.